All right, get ready, because today we're taking a deep dive into the world of Wi-Fi. That thing that keeps us all connected. But we're going way beyond just the basics. We're going to uncover the drama, the genius, and the legal battles that shaped the Wi-Fi we all know and love. So get ready for a wild ride. And to help us break it all down, we've got a tech expert who can make even the most complicated patents sound exciting. Before we get to those lawsuits and billions of dollars, oh, believe me, we're getting there, we need to understand where it all began, right? The inventors, the dreamers who dared to imagine a wireless world. So where do we even start with this thing?
Well, I think the best place to start is with the problem they were trying to solve. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, the internet as we know it was just starting to emerge, but the idea of connecting computers wirelessly inside a building and at high speeds, that was practically science fiction.
Yeah, I remember those days. Dial-up modems, tangled cables everywhere. But someone, somewhere, said, enough is enough. There has to be a better way.
Right, and that someone was a team of brilliant minds at Australia's CSIRO. That's CSIRO, led by a radio astronomer named John O'Sullivan.
John O'Sullivan. Now, there's a name you don't hear nearly enough in the Tech Hall of Fame. So what's his story?
Well, O'Sullivan's story is a perfect example of how seemingly unrelated fields can come together to create something truly groundbreaking. He started in radio astronomy, studying, radio waves from space. But it was his work, analyzing those signals, that led to a really pivotal invention, the fast Fourier transform chip, or FFT chip.
Okay, hold on. Tech jargon alert. Can you break that down for us? What in the world is an FFT chip, and why should we care about it?
Imagine you're trying to listen to a symphony orchestra, but all the instruments are playing at the same time. It's just a cacophony of sound, right? The FFT chip is like an audio engineer. It separates out each individual instrument so you can hear the violins, the cellos, the flutes, all distinctly.
Okay, I'm kind of getting it. So this chip helped O'Sullivan analyze those complex signals, but how does that translate to Wi-Fi?
Patience, we're getting there. So O'Sullivan returns to Australia in 1983. He's working on this massive project, the Australia Telescope at CSIRO. And his team, they're called the Signals Processing Group. They're tasked with finding practical uses for their cutting-edge tech. Partially because, well, research is expensive.
Ah, yes. The never-ending quest for funding. Necessity is the mother of invention, right? So what kind of practical uses are we talking about? Did they invent the cosmic microwave or something?
Not quite. But they did do some pretty incredible things, like they applied their technology to ultrasonic imaging in coal mines to make them safer. And they even helped to revolutionize medical imaging, using their techniques to improve CT scans.
So this FFT chip was already making waves in other fields. But how did they go from that to wireless networking? It's not like they just woke up one morning and said, hey, let's invent Wi-Fi today.
You're right. It wasn't some sudden epiphany. It was a series of challenges and ingenious solutions. Remember, CSIRO was really actively looking for projects that had, commercial potential. And the demand for faster, more reliable wireless networks, that was growing rapidly.
So they saw an opportunity, a chance to take their expertise and apply it to this problem that really needed a solution.
Exactly. And in 1990, O'Sullivan and his team decided to tackle it head on. Their goal was ambitious. They wanted to create a wireless network that could transfer data at speeds comparable to the fastest wired networks of the time.
Hold on, we're talking about the early 90s here.
Yeah.
Most people were still trying to figure out how to use email. Were wireless networks even a thing back then?
They were, but they were slow, unreliable, and limited in range. O'Sullivan's team envisioned something far more powerful, something that could truly unleash the potential of wireless communication.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. So what happened next? Did they just lock themselves in a lab and emerge years later with a Wi-Fi router?
If only it were that simple. There was a major obstacle standing in their way, a problem that had plagued wireless communication for decades. Multipath propagation.
Multipath propagation.
That sounds ominous. Is that like some kind of interdimensional rift in the space-time continuum?
Not quite that dramatic, but it was a serious technical hurdle. Imagine you're trying to have a conversation in a room with a lot of echoes. The sound bounces off the walls, and it makes it really hard to understand what's being said. That's essentially what happens with radio waves in a wireless network. They bounce off surfaces, they arrive at the receiver at slightly different times, creating interference and distorting the signal.
So it's like trying to send a clear message through an echo chamber. How on earth did they solve that?
Well, this is where O'Sullivan's earlier work with the FFT chip comes in. They realized that they could divide the data into smaller chunks, transmit those chunks on multiple frequencies at the same time, and then use the FFT chip to reassemble them at the receiving end, correcting for any delays caused by those pesky echoes. So it's like sending a message in pieces, each one taking a different route, and then magically putting it back together perfectly on the other side.
That's a great analogy, and that, in essence, is the birth of Wi-Fi as we know it. They filed their first Australian patent for this technology in 1992, and the U.S. patent followed in 1993.
Wow. From radio astronomy to revolutionizing wireless networks, John O'Sullivan and his team at CSIRO, they were really onto something huge. But I have a feeling this is just the beginning of the story, right? What happened next? How did this Australian invention go from patents to a global phenomenon? And what about those legal battles you mentioned?
Well, that's where things get really interesting, but we'll have to save that for part 2 of our deep dive.
Okay, so we've got this revolutionary Wi-Fi technology all patented and ready to go, but I imagine getting it out into the world, making it something we all use every day, that must have been a whole other challenge, right?
Oh, absolutely. Patents are one thing, but turning a lab invention into something that, everyone is using, that requires a whole different skill set.
So how did CSIRO, all those brilliant scientists, how did they handle that? Did they have to become like, tech entrepreneurs overnight?
Well, they were smart enough to realize they needed help on the business side, so they partnered with a company called Radiata Inc., founded by 2 more Australian tech pioneers, Dave Skellern and Neil West.
Radiata Inc. So they were the bridge between the lab and the real world. What did they actually do with this Wi-Fi technology? Did they create like the first ever Wi-Fi router?
They did something even more crucial, actually. They developed a chip, a tiny little piece of silicon, but it was essentially the heart and soul of Wi-Fi. And it made it compatible with this emerging standard called 802.11a.
802.11a, that rings a bell. Isn't that like the ancestor of all the Wi-Fi standards we use today?
You got it. It was kind of like the first version, and Radiata's chip was the key to making it all work.
So this was a pretty big deal, huh? I bet all the big tech companies were suddenly very interested.
Oh, you bet they were. Picture this. The year 2000, a huge tech conference in Atlanta. Radiata is there, showing off their amazing new chip. And in walks Cisco Systems, one of the giants of the networking world. They immediately saw the potential, The future of connectivity was right there in front of them.
Okay, now I'm really hooked. What did Cisco do?
What any smart tech company with deep pockets would do, they acquired Radiata for a mind-blowing $567 million.
Whoa. $500 million. That's incredible.
Oh.
That's not just a validation. That's like a massive victory.
Exactly. It showed the world that Wi-Fi was here to stay. And just a couple years later, in 2002, the first unlicensed Wi-Fi products hit the market. Laptops with Wi-Fi cards, routers, the whole ecosystem started to take shape.
So from a lab in Australia to the global tech stage, Wi-Fi was well on its way to becoming the essential technology it is today. But you mentioned legal battles earlier, right? Where does that all fit into the story?
Well, all this success, all these companies making billions from Wi-Fi, CSIRO, quite rightly, decided they wanted their fair share. They were the patent holders, after all. So they started seeking royalties from the big tech companies using their invention.
Makes sense. So who did they go after?
They went after the biggest names in the industry. Dell, Intel, Microsoft, HP, Apple, 14 of the heavy hitters. And of course, those companies pushed back against CSIRO.
Wow, that's like a David versus Goliath situation. A government research organization taking on the giants of Silicon Valley. What were these companies arguing?
They were basically trying to invalidate CSIRO's patent, claiming it wasn't original, saying they shouldn't have to pay royalties. The pressure on CSIRO was enormous. We're talking about a relatively small organization going up against some of the wealthiest, most powerful companies in the world.
So what happened? Did CSIRO back down? Did they settle for, just a small amount to avoid a long and costly legal battle?
Not at all. They stood their ground. And in 2009, something really interesting happened. Hewlett-Packard, one of the companies they were suing, they decided to settle.
HP breaking ranks. That must have been a huge turning point. Did the other companies follow suit?
You bet they did. One by one, they all caved. In the end, CSIRO secured over $205 million in settlements from those first 14 companies. And they weren't done yet.
They weren't. Who else did they go after?
Well, they set their sights on another massive industry. U.S. mobile phone operators, Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, they all ended up settling with CSIRO as well.
So this little research organization from Australia, they took on the giants of the tech world, and they won. What an amazing story. But what happened to all that money?
They did something really smart with it. They invested a huge chunk of it, over $450 million by 2015, back into research and development.
That's incredible. They not only defended their invention, but they used it to support future innovation.
Exactly. It shows their dedication to science, to making the world a better place.
Okay, so we've covered the invention, the legal battles, the global impact of Wi-Fi. But I'm still curious. What was it actually like to use Wi-Fi back in those early days?
Imagine this.
All right, take me back to those early days. It's the early 2000s. Wi-Fi is just starting to become a thing. I've got my new laptop with a shiny Wi-Fi card.
Yeah.
What's life like now?
Well, for starters, you're probably feeling pretty good about yourself, right? And no more dial-up modem, no more waiting forever to connect to the internet. Remember that horrible screeching sound?
Oh, I remember it all too well. It's like torture. But with Wi-Fi, everything changed.
It did. It really did. Suddenly, you get to sit on your couch, open your laptop, and browse the web without any wires. No more tying up the phone line either. Downloading music was actually possible, and chatting with friends online was, actually enjoyable.
It's funny how quickly we forget what a big deal that was. We take Wi-Fi for granted now, but back then, it was like a whole new world opened up.
It really was. And the impact went way beyond just our homes, Coffee shops turned into remote offices. Universities and libraries became these hubs of connectivity.
Yeah, I remember seeing students everywhere with their laptops.
It was amazing. Wi-Fi really changed the way we interact with each other and the way we experience the world. And it's still evolving, right? Now we've got smartphones, smart homes, smart everything, all connected thanks to Wi-Fi.
It's become like the invisible force that powers our digital lives. So we've come a long way. From a radio astronomer just trying to find a better way to analyze signals, to a technology that has transformed the entire world.
It's a pretty incredible story.
John O'Sullivan and his team at CSIRO, they really changed the course of history.
They did. And they didn't just invent Wi-Fi. They also fought to protect their invention. They took on some of the biggest, most powerful companies in the world, and they won.
It's a real David versus Goliath story, and an important reminder that innovation deserves to be recognized and rewarded. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Wi-Fi, I want to leave you with this thought. Imagine for a second, what would the world be like without it?
It's kind of hard to even picture, isn't it?
Everything we do relies on Wi-Fi in some way.
The way we work, the way we learn, the way we connect, it's hard to overstate its impact.
So a huge thank you to you, our tech expert, for guiding us through this incredible story.
My pleasure. It was a fascinating journey.
And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious.